that will look at those 6 secrets. From there, you'll stop hearing from me because I think it's much more interesting to hear from our city leaders here today. So without further introduction, let me introduce them. First, we have Ms. Leticia Gutiérrez, the General Director of Policy Coordination and Environmental Culture at the Ministry of Environment in Mexico City, Mexico. Next, we will have Sikhumbuzo Hlongwane, the Executive Director of Economic Development and Planning at the Municipality of KwaDukuza in South Africa. And finally, but certainly not least, last but not least, we will have Jazmin Burgess, the Climate Mitigation Manager from the Greater London Authority. So firstly, before we go to them, we will speak a little bit about why is WWF working on cities and why are we here today? So within WWF, our cities program has the vision and ambition that by 2025, cities worldwide act as transformation catalysts, implementing integrated and inclusive plans in line with 1.5 degrees Celsius, while ensuring urban resilience and unlocking individual and collective climate action. So one of the biggest areas that we have been pushing forward in this in the last 10 years now is the One Planet City Challenge. So just to share with you very briefly what this is a cycle, a 2-year cycle, where we first work with cities to do their data reporting, and then we pre-screen that data. To see kind of which cities are standing out at the strongest level at both the national level and then eventually at the global level. And we do that based on a review of the data by an international expert jury. And we're happy to have several of our jury members on the call right now listening in here today. And finally, we celebrate cities because we know that it's a lot of work. And we also recognize the real extreme challenges that cities are going through today. Certainly that the epicenter of the COVID crisis, but equally with the climate crisis coming around the corner. So we know that all the struggles that are there, as well as the opportunities, and sometimes we do need to celebrate, which is a little bit what we want to do with you here today. So one other key development to note is that in this last and most recent run of the One Planet City Challenge, we have now started assessing cities to see how closely they are aligned to the Paris Agreement, in particular the 1.5 degrees Celsius target. So this is where we are right now. And I think before I stop here, I just also need to really acknowledge the work we do with partnerships. So we have been working on this program for many years with ICLEI, and we're very happy that ICLEI and CDP have joined forces to make data reporting even easier for cities. And we try to align the data in order to do our assessment with the Global Covenant of Mayors and also the questions that they are asking of cities. And certainly we have been very inspired by C40's work, in particular the Deadline 2020 report, to help cities move forward on these aspects. This most recent round, we had 250 cities from 50 countries, actually more than 250 cities from more than 50 countries join the One Planet City Challenge. And we are excited to see that this program is growing and that we see stronger ambition from cities, large and small, from all continents around the world. So without further ado, I'm going to stop my share and hand over to my colleague, Anthony, who's going to just share a celebratory video with you. And then also just to say that highlight Anthony's strong engagement in this work together with a consultant we had named Gavin Lewis, who put together the study that we're going to go through next. And Anthony will also be monitoring the questions if you have any questions following this event. Anthony, over to you. If not, I can also share the video if that would be easier. Let me just get it ready to go. Okay. I think I will share the video because maybe Anthony's having technical problems. So 1 second. Okay. Oh, Anthony is great.
Sorry, is that working?
It is, but it's a few seconds into it. Could you just start it from the beginning?
Oh, sure. Okay. From the beginning. Signal if it doesn't work.
Oh, we don't have the sound. Well, we are all used to the challenge. Thank you, Anthony, for sharing that. And apologies for the small technical difficulty there. We're probably all used to that now in the world of Zoom. But we will be sharing that also on our social media. It will go live after this event, so you can all have it as well if you want to share it in your respective channels. So I'm going to go back to the presentation and just very briefly share with you what we have found in our 6 secrets of successful cities. So 6 secrets: measure what matters, showing political leadership, leading by example, utilizing inspirational networks, forming university partnerships, as well as highlighting the co-benefits. So just briefly on what we looked at in this study, which will also go live today after this event, and we will happily share you the link to the study. So first, measure what matters, measuring emissions and risks. Knowing the sources also helps to know, where we go in terms of successful strategic planning going forward, as well as indicators like air quality, health impacts, congestion, in order to make it meaningful for people. It's also about quantifying problems and impacts in order to, especially in this challenging world we're living in, acquire funding in order to continue to invest in new projects by showing what you've already been able to do and the impacts that you have made. Secondly is showing political leadership. And here we have 3 political leaders on the call, which is fantastic, to really demonstrate the mandate and the commitment, including in election campaigns to put climate front and center, working with influential expert advisors, and also transparency of information that people can really see what is out there when it comes to climate change. Identifying funding, this goes without saying, it's a very important aspect, and demonstrating that leadership in order to procure those resources, as well as empowering measures. It's not just about the mayor, it's not just about the directors, but it's about everyone involved in order to really push for a stronger climate plan. Leading by example, again, we have several leaders here today. So inspiring others to follow your work, especially, smaller and medium-sized cities like KwaDukuza that can really show others the way and or the path to take. And certainly Mexico City has been doing this and London as well. Achieving results fast, demonstrations, learning from the best practices, testing things out before expanding the rollout. So really, what does work and how can we then push it further? And encouraging the market for environmentally friendly products, including the importance of public procurement. International networks, again, here, our friends at ICLE have been very, very important, but there are so many other ones as well at the international level, but also national networks, regional networks, local cooperation to really create strong and solidarity at the local level in order to provide expertise, knowledge sharing, resources, motivation, and keep this embedded in political cycles. Finally, almost finally, forming university partnerships to really analyze both the research and capacity, test out projects with students, a great force of data collectors. It's a win-win. Students want to learn and want to be engaged. Local authorities always need more support and help on this. And really, building a long-term engagement with university partnerships. And finally, highlighting co-benefits. We all know the struggles that cities are facing with climate change, as well as COVID, but we also know that if we do act, and especially if we act now, there are so many clear benefits: cleaner air quality, job creations, reduction in traffic, lower energy bills, green spaces. I will actually note that our friends at the Coalition of Urban Transitions have also put out a great report about the COVID recovery and the job benefits of green investment. So happy to share that with you afterwards as well. So finally, the challenges are immense and the urgency is overwhelming. We also know that there are challenges in terms of budget, in terms of jurisdictional restraints, but we do know, as our motto at WWF states, together it is possible, together possible. So we want to work together, we want to work with you, we want to show what is possible and work for long-term change in individual cities and certainly across them. So without further ado, we will be zooming in a little bit on some of these experts' secrets. So forming university partnerships, we will then hear from Leticia from Mexico City. Showing political leadership, we will then go over to South Africa and hear from Sikhumbuzo and KwaDukuza. And then finally on measuring what matters. And last but not least, over to London. So that will be all from my side. And then, yes, I will stop sharing so that Leticia can share with us from Mexico City. And certainly to acknowledge our global winner.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you very much for WWF invitation to join this panel. For me, it's an honor to share with my colleagues. I will share with you my screen. Can you see it now? All right.
Yes, we can. If you can just maybe expand it. Yeah, I think that one.
All right.
Perfect.
Great. So I will start by saying, and that was the last piece of your video, that Mexico City, we have worked to put out a plan, a very ambitious climate action plan that aims to decarbonize the city at 2050, which proposes great challenges for the city, but great opportunities to redesign the way we are working and building and implementing climate policy. I would first like to give you some snapshots of Mexico City to introduce my presentation. So first to say that Mexico City, it's very important to understand the context because Mexico City is, even though we are a city, we are as well as a state because we're a city state and a capital city. This means that our mayor has really the political rank of a governor, which has been very useful to setting up these very ambitious targets because actually Dr. Sheinbaum used to be an IPCC climate scientist. She's a physicist and she embraced our climate action plans from the highest level of government. Mexico City is the fifth economy in Latin America after Brazil, Mexico, Argentina, and Colombia, and it concentrates 17% of the country's GDP. The first political constitution of Mexico City was approved by the Congress in 2016, and something very important to highlight is that it recognizes equal rights in its most diverse meaning. For instance, the access to a healthy environment is one of the many rights stated in our constitution. It has the same weight as other rights, such as the access to education, health, housing, and food. Even though Mexico City represents only 0.08% of the total national territory, we concentrate 1/5 of the population of Mexico as a country. This is a map of Mexico City where you can see in the bottom part of it, the green and the yellow parts of the map. You can see all of that part of the map is conservation land. Is 60%, around 60% of Mexico's territory is covered with natural forests, grasslands, and wetlands. And part of this territory are natural protected areas managed by community-owned forests. Mexico City was built on a lake and a wetland system in pre-Hispanic times. And since then, we have been fighting to dry our city with great infrastructure. That's why today I would like to focus my case study on sharing with you how putting on the center natural climate solutions on the center of all climate policy, we aim to actually get to that target of decarbonizing the city. Another important thing to consider in Mexico City and the evaluating panel of the OPCC highlighted that is that we have serious challenges. In terms of socioeconomic inequalities, only 20% of the population receives water every day. The rest have partial access to water or no access at all. 70% of the poorest population have had to look housing outside of the urban area of Mexico City in this southern part of the map I was showing you in the slide before. Because of the lack of affordable options. And this has created a staggered effect of pressure on conservation land, leading to land use change to informal urban settlements. In terms of access to green areas, there are municipalities with less than 2 square meters per person, while in the richest areas of the city, this can be more than 16 square meters. That, for example, is a photo of Iztapalapa Municipality with a population of 1.8 million people, where you can see that in some areas of Iztapalapa, people have no access to green areas at all. In contrast, this is one of the richest areas in Mexico City, where you can visit Bosque de Chapultepec, and maybe some of you that have been here for visiting reasons in Mexico City, you have been there. That is an emblematic urban forest in the heart of Mexico City, which actually last year won the gold category prize of the World Urban Parks, and it has an extension of 678 hectares with parts of natural forest and a very diverse cultural offer. Many of the most important museums are inside Chapultepec. In terms of climate vulnerability, Mexico City is exposed to intense rainfalls resulting on heavy floods. That's one of our main problems we have. Also, the urban heat island effect that has increased due to climate change, and some climate models that predict that Mexico City's mean temperature could increase 4 degrees Celsius by half of the century if no action is taken. This is, for example, one of the works we have been doing with the National Autonomous University on refining the climate models the Climate and Atmospheric Science Research Center has to the conditions of Mexico City. In terms of water, Mexico City's aquifer has been historically overexploited, and we import 40% of the water that we consume in the city from distant sources, which makes the water distribution system more vulnerable to climate impacts. Actually, many of the data that I have been sharing with you today has been possible because of the work we've done with universities in terms of diagnosing the risks in Mexico City and building up to refine these climate models for establishing more precise climate measures. In this context, we have put nature-based solutions in the center of Mexico City's environmental and climate policies, and I will share with you some examples of what we have done. We have developed a green infrastructure master plan for Mexico City that considers 4 criteria to prioritize the interventions. And all this data we've gathered with the National Autonomous University, Universidad Autónoma Nacional, and other private universities as well, have led us to prioritize the interventions in terms of connectivity, accessibility, functionality, and resilience. We have defined green infrastructure as a planned and interconnected network of green, blue, and gray spaces designed and managed to offer multiple socio-environmental benefits that promote the protection of biodiversity, the improvement of ecosystem services, adaptation to climate change, and prevention and mitigation of risks. We see, or we want to see a city in which that southern part of Mexico City, where you have grasslands, wetlands, forests, connects with other parts of the city through urban areas, through main streets, through small parks, etc. An example of an intervention of this green infrastructure master plan has been the Green Challenge. We launched last year a goal to revegetate the city with 20 million trees and plants. And so far, in 1.5 years, we have reached 15 million plants. For this program, we have prioritized the use of native species, and that has been an emphasis we've done very important in the city, because in the past, there was a planting of different species, even exotic or even invasive species. It has been an important challenge since there was no market for native plants for 20 million, for the target of 20 million trees and plants. And we had to do a complex re-engineering of the city's nurseries to produce the plants ourselves. We have also made an effort to include pollinator gardens in most of our green infrastructure interventions. We have also developed gardening training programs hand in hand with universities in Mexico, specifically for women, and we have trained personnel from the 13 municipalities in Mexico City in environmental gardening and maintenance of these spaces. These are examples of revegetation on main avenues, streets, and small parks. You can see here some emblematic avenues with pollinator gardens. This is Chapultepec Avenue, Tlalpan Avenue, and a new linear park in Periférico Oriente. We have rehabilitated 22 public spaces as new parks with green infrastructure. And this is an example of Parque Cuitláhuac. Actually, in Iztapalapa Municipality, the first pictures that I showed you, that you can practically see nothing but gray pixels in the photo. This is Parque Cuitláhuac with 40 hectares in the first stage. The park was built in an old garbage dump, and it is in this municipality with very few access to green spaces. This is another example of a new park in a reclaimed space that belonged to the asphalt plant in Mexico City. And the new park has 2.6 hectares. For these two parks, it's important to highlight that we built up an alliance with the Research Engineering Institute of the National Autonomous University to use sustainable green materials for the construction of the different infrastructure you can see there in the parks. We have intervened as well 25 natural protected areas with restoration and reflection activities. This is an example of Sierra de Santa Catarina, where we opened it to the public because these were areas that were fenced, and the people that lived around couldn't access the natural protected areas. And we included urban infrastructure, main services, pollinator gardens that you can see there in the picture, and reforested an important area. This is another example in Xochimilco Ecological Park that it was also not accessible to people, and we made it accessible to people. It was a contradictory that forest areas around these areas couldn't have access to nature. This is another example, Canal Nacional, an emblematic pre-Hispanic canal of Tenochtitlan that has been rehabilitated as a linear park, and it was also closed to people, and we opened it to people. There used to be a fence along both sides of the canal. And this is another example of an urban forest where we built in the east part of the city, also next to impoverished neighborhoods. We did an intervention of 160 hectares. We constructed that new urban wetland that you can see there, and did some works to maintenance of the existing one. So finally, I would like to highlight that to actually implement these ambitious measures, of course, the alliance with the university has been very important. And we have put on the center the inequalities that Mexico suffers, putting on the center how these interventions for climate actions help to build more well-being for people, conserve biodiversity, help people and ecosystems to adapt, to climate stress, flood reduction, runoff control and drainage management, because floods are a huge problem in Mexico City, job creation, because the social component for us is critical, the increase of economic value of these spaces that we have rehabilitated, and how, as I was saying, provides better healthy and quality life for people, especially now amidst COVID that we are living. Thank you.
Absolutely fantastic, Leticia. It's well, obviously Mexico City was already our global winner, but now we're even more excited after hearing that wonderful presentation. And I will note that WWF is also starting to work, as you might have heard from our colleagues in Mexico, with nature-based solutions. So I think for all the city participants here, and certainly for us, we have a lot to learn and work with you. Fantastic. So I just want to make note, I know that there's been some comments recognizing your great work, but also do remember the Q&A if you have any questions for the cities. And I'm going to put Gavin Lewis on the spot here, since he actually put together our study looking at the 6 secrets to successful cities. So I want to make sure that he also has a chance to ask a question. So if you have a chance, Gavin, do add a question in there if there's anything that inspires you from these fantastic cities. Wonderful. And now we will jump over to KwaDukuza in South Africa and hear from Sikhumbuzo to hear some of the wonderful things that your city has been doing on political leadership. Do you have a presentation, or will you just speak freely? Both are fine.
Oh, I will speak free. I will speak free
and
to
I will
provide leadership.
No worry. Wonderful.
Yes. No. Good afternoon. Good morning to everybody. Well, I'm just going to talk about the journey that we have been involved as a municipality in terms of trying to ensure that climate change is part of our development agenda as a municipality. Maybe just to give a little bit of context of KwaDukuza municipality, we are the secondary city in South Africa. In terms of secondary cities, are cities that are classified to have a population size between 250 to 1 million. In KwaDukuza, we are having about a population of 300,000 people within the area. We are the coastal city. We also thrive because of property development. We attract a lot of people who've got money in South Africa. They usually buy their second homes within our region. Hence, our approach as a municipality has been based on trying to say we'll try to tap in on that. But I want just to focus on what we have been doing in the last few years as part of the areas that I've been asked to talk about particularly around political leadership. In KwaDukuza, what we have done in the last 6 years with the late mayor, I think we have lost our mayor, was a champion of the climate change 2 months ago through COVID-19. But when we started the program, one of the key issues was to identify and position our mayor as the climate change political champion, which means that he was going to lead all the programs related to climate change. As part of that responsibility, you'll know that in developing countries, climate change is a new concept. And in South Africa, because of our history, we've got competing needs. We still have a lot of people who've got a high poverty rate, unemployment rate, and also underdevelopment because of apartheid spatial planning. So we have to balance as an institution to say, if you focus on climate change and also on sustainability, what will happen with other key issues. So as part of the political responsibility of our mayor, one of the things that he have done during that was to ensure that as a municipality, we include climate change as a key driver of our development agenda. In South Africa, by law, all local government municipalities are supposed to have a 5-year strategic plan, which is known as the integrated development plan. And within that plan, we've got sector plans. One of the sector plans that we're having is a climate change sector plan that will then enable the municipality to implement climate change, but it's not only the municipality, all other levels of government that then have any intervention within our space, they would then be forced to embrace the dental vision of the municipality. So we've done that as an element. But the mayor, when he started, he was not aware about climate change. He was not even schooled on that one. One of the things that we did with the assistance of Italy, Africa in our side, was to have a dedicated capacity building program for him, which was involved training, exposure, and also having a mentor who was giving support for a period of 6 months. That then evolved for him when you go to a number of platforms internationally, was able to speak eloquent on climate change as a subject, but also within the institution was able to begin to mainstream the climate change in all our department. So as part of the program, also he then committed the municipality around compact of mayors. He signed during the Italy conference in South Korea. Within the period of 2 years, because of his leadership, we were able to become the first secondary city in Africa to get all the 4 badges in terms of competence of mayors, in terms of compliance. So we're able to move on that level. But the mayor, as much as a full-time councillor or political head, will rely on the support of the administration. Within this administration, as a head of department, was then designated as a technical champion of the program. But one of my key responsibilities, I'm on the performance-based contract. So in terms of my own annual performance contract, climate change form part of my target, performance target in terms of the program. And it's not only what could be achieved, it's also around forming partnership, around getting funding for the institution, but also ensuring that all other municipal departments are also compliant with climate change. So he forced me, myself and my city manager to have that as part of our responsibility. Over the last 2 years, we have evolved each and every head of department. It could be finance, it could be technical services, your electrical department, your civil engineering department, human settlement, all of them, they have targets related to climate change. This is how it shows that this is the administrative leadership within the institution that then also measured on how much they are contributing on that. But one of the key issues that I want to share for us that have been a driving factor have been to say, how do we communicate? The municipality have a strong communication platform. In each and every platform that we are communicating, we try by all means to put as part of the communication climate change messages. But the mayor have used his all the statutory speeches. It could be when he approved the annual budget for council, when he approved the integrated development plan by council, they will try to put clear targets for climate change. And the new term of office of the current council came into being in August 2016. And then as part of the 5-year plan, the then mayor, the late Mayor Mthembu, then put that as part of the agenda for in the next 5 years. He put clear targets, what he wanted to be seen being done, because the first 3 years where he was a political head, we were involved mostly on demonstration projects, on policy development, on planning. And then he said they want to dedicate the current term of council around implementation, which means he was pushing for us to say, let's use our own limited resources to ensure that we are able to mainstream climate change. It could be around your street lights or public lighting, which we do have our own budget. He was pushing, council took a decision to say we will change all our light to energy efficient light. The new one will then be put on that. We do have about over 6,000 street lights we have been implementing as part of the project, just to demonstrate that kind of leadership. The other issue that I think have been lessons for us is that as part of administrative leadership and political leadership, because we report on monthly basis to council. On my side, the mayor also was a chairperson of the portfolio committee that is responsible for climate change, which means each and every month we would get a report on the progress that has been made in terms of his commitment to the competence of mayors, but secondly, on the programs that have been approved and budgeted by council in terms of how we're implementing. So you will be able to, if you take him to any platform, to speak and also to mobilize additional resources on climate change related issues. The other issues for us, what we have been able to do as a municipality, we have been in forefront of establishing the network within the area. Previously, it was only eThekwini or Durban Metro that did have a capacity of climate change because they were a metro. They also did have dedicated resources and financial resources, intelligent partners. But we have been able as a municipality working with eThekwini to establish a regional network which include about similar sized municipalities within our area where we are sharing information, and also we've been able to put some of the funding application together. But also as part of that exercise, we have begun to expose ourselves on peer-to-peer exercise. And on political level, also the province, our mayor was, 2 years ago, the provincial government, which is a regional government in other terms, hosted the first mayors climate compact conference where our mayor was a speaker, but also we were then given about 4 awards for providing leadership. But we do believe that what we have been doing over the years of trying to institutionalize climate change within the institution, but secondly, of ensuring that all our policies have been amended and also take climate change in the forefront, we have been able to provide leadership. But the other key issue for us is that for the first time when our mayor was running for his term, it was the first time because it's coming from the ruling party in South Africa, to break into a dedicated manifesto. In his manifesto, one of the key issues that was driving for the first time was sustainability and also climate change agenda, which I do believe that he provided leadership. If you see the manifesto, which is archived in his political front, you will see that it was the first time. And if you compare what was part of his own personal manifesto for the municipality and compare for the national manifesto of the ruling party, you will then find that the climate change was not part of the agenda of that, but he was able, based on his exposure and experience, to do that. One of the key issues for me that I think which I would like to share in closure is that in the development context, you should be able to use, that is one thing that I have learned, that the way you communicate issues of sustainability and climate change, you should be able to ensure that they take into account your context. One of the things that the mayor have been able to do, have been able to emphasize the core benefits, have been able to emphasize the core benefits. It could be around street lights, because when we started the issue of climate change, one of the revenue sources of this council, about 60% were relying on energy. So when we then begin to say you want to shift and begin to encourage households to go to energy efficient, you are then threatening your revenue base. And then he was able, when it was presenting, to say, during my time, I went out on the market to get loans to upgrade the existing infrastructure because of the load challenges of electrical load. But if we are then able to provide, encourage people to go to energy efficient, we'll be able to then get a core benefit that the municipality will reduce money in terms of getting loans, but second, you will reduce money around maintenance. But I think one of the key issues is more around how do you communicate your message, and it can't be only a political message. We have been able through political leadership to then begin to champion the private sector involvement in our programs, and to able also to bring private sector players, international players who are involved in efficient to support local businesses in terms of doing your free energy audit. This was done in 2018 and 2017, when we were able to get our own resources, financial resources, to support the program as part of our leadership, because we felt that if the municipalities would continue to champion on its own without private sector involvement, we'll have a problem. But lastly, there have been an issue to say we have been able to use our strength, and I've made a referral on property development or your construction sector in KwaDukuza. We have been able on the word go, when we got involved, the issue was that you focus on green building guidelines, you ensure that in all your approvals, you begin to mainstream the climate change. And the mayor was saying, I want to be measured as much as development, there's a lot of people who are owning property. Those people, they could afford to retrofit their own buildings, retrofit their own private residential to go to energy efficiency. So in short, our strength has been on the issues of the capacity building in terms of us as officials and administration. We have been able to sustain the programs beyond programs, but one of the key issues around political leadership, we were involved with urban LEDs with Italy. It was a 3-year program, and there was a gap of 12 to 18 months. We continued with our programs without Italy involvement because those programs were embedded within the institution, they were institutionalized. We were able also to put all our resources to work. We were not doing what we were doing because there was an international donor or a partner involved. So we're able to demonstrate leadership. Hence, when Italy was going for urban LEDs too, which involved also Rwanda, they then invited KwaDukuza to be part of the peer learning partner of the program because we were able to sustain the program beyond the partners involved. I think with those short words, I've been able to cover the elements, which is part of the paper that is being published today. Political leadership, funding, ability to get funding and partnership, but also strong administration in terms of managers who are able to take the programs forward based on the political support and policy instruments that have been adopted by Council. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you covered the entire study, all the 6 secrets. But indeed, we have been very impressed from WWF side and certainly the One Planet City Challenge jury in terms of the political leadership of your city. And I really liked that you said several things about, climate change as a key driver, even in campaigning messages, and that it shouldn't just be at the mayor's office, but across all the different departments and really the efforts on capacity building and co-benefits. Yes, co-benefits was also a very key point in this study. So thank you so much for your wonderful words. And last but not least, we will go over to London and talk a little bit about measuring what matters. So over to you, Jazmin. And can I just, before I hand over to you while you're sharing your screen, there are some great questions in the question and answer session. So I think they're directed both to KwaDukuza and Mexico City. So if you can just offer some thoughts there. And if we have enough time, we'll do a more open discussion at the end, but just to allow some of those questions to already be answered. Yes.
Great. So just checking, is that okay? Great. Hi everyone. Really pleasure to be here, and huge thanks to WWF for awarding us with the One Planet City Challenge Award for the UK. We're absolutely thrilled in London, and hopefully I'll give you a quick whistle-stop tour about what we have going on and how measuring fits into this. So just briefly, by a bit of a way of context, so the Greater London Authority is the strategic authority for London, which is headed up by the Mayor of London, Mayor Sadiq Khan, who you'll see on this picture here. It's an interesting, so London was the first city in the UK to have a mayoralty, created in 2000, but it's quite interesting because if you contrast our powers as a mayor to other cities internationally, we actually have quite limited powers in terms of what we can do when it comes to climate and environment, which means that we have to be very creative in how we approach our policies, and that also explains why the measuring and the reporting comes in. So from a strict point of view, the mayor has legal powers over air quality and waste in London, and so we do a lot in terms of the the regulation and the implementation of that. But we also he also has significant roles in terms of how he convenes London. So our local boroughs, of which there are 33 of them, which sit underneath the GLA. Then also how we can be a voice for the different business sectors and different groups in London is very important. So as with that in mind, it's how we deliver our environmental and our climate goals relies very much on cross-sector collaboration. It's not just a top-down city hall-led approach. It's very much about how can we activate other parts of Londoners to get behind the goals that the mayor sets for London and play their role in ensuring that the different steps that need to be taken can be done. Because of that, it's very much not a regulation-based approach to a lot of our climate action. It's very much around collaboration, where we can, where we can find joint approaches for action, and also where we can also be encouraged to be more ambitious by other parts of London as well. So you know, this some of the examples of how we work across different actors in London to achieve our climate goals. You know, we have a very active engagement with our business community in terms of encouraging them to take all the steps they can to be zero carbon. We also work very closely with community groups. We have a huge program being rolled out on community energy, which looks at how local Londoners can play a role in delivering renewable energy for London in line to our zero carbon goals. We like working with you know, citizen groups to see where there are upcoming you know, policies, and also we work with our boroughs in London who are have strategic and implementation control over their local areas to see how they can help deliver the overall goal that the mayor has set for London. So in terms of where we are in our targets and what we have, you know, where we want to be. So the mayor has set very, very bold goals for London on everything across the environment sector. On climate change, we've got a very ambitious goal to be a zero carbon city. Previously was by 2050. I think at the time of us being reviewed by the WWF award, it was 2050, but in January, the mayor moved us forward to 2030, which has certainly accelerated our plans of what we want to achieve and helped move us faster. We also have very bold goals across other environmental areas, including air quality, which you probably would have heard a lot about what we have underway in London on air quality, on adaptation, on waste, and on green infrastructure. The point of this sort of diagram is basically to show that we don't really see any of these environmental issues in silos. The whole point is that we want to have an integrated approach. So we know that, you know, by some of our air quality measures, such as the ultra low emission zone, we know that it helps reduce carbon emissions, which then can help our climate goals. So we're very much taking an integrated approach. In 2018, we launched our London Environment Strategy, which was the first integrated environment strategy. So drawing on what I just mentioned about integrated goals. That included a whole range of targets and ambitions, you know, everything from, as I've mentioned, being a zero carbon and a zero waste city, increasing green cover to 50%, and looking at how to, you know, accelerate action on fuel poverty and solar, and funding to catalyze action. And what we have been doing since 2018 is working very hard to implement what is happening, what under these ambitions and targets. So what we were reviewed on in the WWF award was very much our progress on these goals and where we are and where we're going. So I think that leads very nicely into the first secret of success of cities, which is what I've been asked to speak about, which is around measuring and monitoring progress. So yeah, we very much adhere to the if you can't measure, you can't manage mantra in terms of how we're taking progress. And I think on that, the point that I made earlier about the fact that we don't have a lot of direct powers, the measuring is actually very, very important. If we can have a comprehensive view of where things are happening across London, that gives us, you know, that role in the strategic context to be able to understand where we need to be doing things, where we need to be accelerating action, and so forth. So we have quite a sort of diverse range of different ways that we measure and monitor progress. So our 1.5 degree climate action plan, which was produced as part of C40's Deadline 2020 project, includes a very detailed zero carbon modeling of our goals to becoming a zero carbon city, and includes carbon budgets. And that gives us very clear sort of interim targets and milestones that we're able to measure our progress against. So having that framework in place has been really useful, because we know that if we're doing things on the right way, should we be encouraging more action over different things, or should we, you know, are we lagging far behind, has been extremely helpful. The other thing I would point to is the London Energy and Greenhouse Gas Inventory, the LEGI, which is our way of monitoring our greenhouse gas emissions. So that keeps track of our greenhouse gas emissions and energy consumption from homes, workplaces, and transport within Greater London, and we do that annually. So that way we're able to see how we are progressing with our emissions reduction targets on an annual basis, how we are, where there are areas that might be lagging, where that we need to show progress. Importantly, you know, as I mentioned, it shows on transport. That is one area where we do have powers over. So the mayor has control of Transport for London, which is the Transport Authority for London. So the LEGI is really helpful for us in order to engage with our partners in Transport for London to understand where there are areas we need to make progress. Alongside the leggy, we also have an annual tracking of our Scope 3 emissions, which shows where consumption-based emissions are going in London. The other areas in which we monitor things, we have the LAEI, which is our monitoring of our air quality, air pollutant estimates, which shows where we are seeing increases and decreases. That's also, sorry, I forgot to mention for the leggy, that's accessible and tracked. So we are very transparent in terms of how we are sharing our data. So on the Mayor of London website, you will see both of these inventories, which are free source data that people are able to access. It's also helpful because if there are other researchers that are looking into things about London, they're able to access this data source. So we know that, you know, if there's work of universities or partners, it will be in line with the data that we are producing. And that means it's also helpful for informing our policies. The other thing which we've tried to increase is how we get data from partners and key actors in London that will show progress against our goals. So we set up a program a couple of years ago together with the CDP and with C40, the Business Climate Leaders program, which looks at you know, how key businesses in London can take action. And as part of that, they commit to disclosing their emissions in London, which is really helpful because it gives us an insight into what big businesses in London, what their typical footprint is, where there are areas that the mayor can maybe engage in, where there's probably opportunities to be able to encourage joint action amongst businesses. And then, of course, our London boroughs also, you know, also monitor their emissions, and we use that as well. The last thing I just want to mention on this was that we also do an annual report on progress on the key targets in the environment strategy, and that's extremely helpful because it shows where, you know, the whole point of a strategy is to be dynamic and to be able to be adapted. So, you know, you can produce something in 2018, but if it's meant to take you up till 2050, you need to keep reviewing it and keep it, you know, keep a sort of live check of how things are going. So that's a great way of being able to show where we've made huge amounts of progress, but also we may want to slightly tweak policies or change our approach. And these annual reports are made public on our website as well, so in the interest of transparency. So that's sort of a bit of an overview of sort of measuring and monitoring progress. I wanted to just quickly just talk about something very quickly which sort of feeds into this, which is around our plans for recovery from COVID-19. And what a green recovery in London looks like, because the fact that we've done all this measuring and we keep monitoring has been extremely helpful in terms of how we've been able to design our recovery program in London. So the way that we have approached recovery is to have eight key missions, as well as a number of cross-cutting themes. Obviously, tackling environment is cross-cutting, but we have a specific theme around a Green New Deal for London, which is our main vehicle for accelerating a green recovery in London. That Green New Deal focuses on tackling the climate and ecological emergencies and improving air quality by also doubling the size of London's green economy by 2030. And under this is a very top line slide, but we were able to construct 3 pillars, which is around the built environment, the transport and the public realm, and then green foundations. And that has basically been the result of how we've been able to access what we've been measuring in our progress so far, what we know, but through monitoring, we know where there may be policies and programs that can inform the recovery and that can deliver co-benefits. Had we not had this in place to be able to review this, it would be we would not be able to turn around a package of programs so quickly in terms of what a recovery would require. Likewise, on you know, we have a particular focus on the green economy by 2030. How we have constructed that target has been very much based on what we know and what the data that we've gathered over the years, over what has been developing, how our economy has been growing, and so forth. So while I'm not going to go into the details of the policies of the recovery program, I think it's just a really good example of how monitoring and measuring can both help you in your real time as you're doing your climate program, but also can be very useful for unexpected things that come around the corner that we need to react to and we need to develop. And as a result, you know, this is, you know, it's extremely helpful. It's, you know, for everything, both future planning and current status. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. This was absolutely fantastic. I've learned a lot, and I think everyone else here has as well. And I have to say, just I commend you all for really, for us organizing this event, that you really stuck to the key issues and really dug deeper into measuring what matters, into political leadership, into, you know, all of these different areas. So we're so excited to see this study really come to life. So we have not many more minutes, which is always the case. You know, the presentations were fantastic. They were very rich and very varied. So from my side, I consider this very much a success, and I know for WWF as well. So I just want to spend the last few minutes on a little bit of Q&A. I think some of you have been starting to answer some of the questions, but try to dig and summarize a few questions together. So firstly, maybe over to Leticia. There was quite a lot of interest on nature-based solutions and some of the work that you're doing, including how to manage urban flooding, monitoring of tree planting, and including survival rates, how to address invasive plants, as well as illegal settlements, and how in protected areas, and how to really try to monitor and control that. I know you also spoke quite a lot about the need to balance social and environmental issues. So if you could just kind of dig a little bit deeper into any of those issues that you feel most comfortable with.
Okay, thank you. I was trying to respond by writing, so I will try to wrap up in so there were many different questions. The first thing about monitoring and evaluating the impact, I would have to say that it really depends on the type of intervention, because if we're talking about, for example, restoration and reforestation activities in the forested areas, there we are relying a lot on community-based monitoring with the communities that own the forests. In Mexico, 80% of the forests are owned by communities and ejidos, also a socially owned property right scheme. And of course, we are also relying on analysis with satellite images for the systemic approach. But in terms, for example, of interventions in urban park, it depends on who administers the park. Even though the Mexico City is making the investment, sometimes it's a municipality who will be administering the park. No, so for instance, with the reforestation plan in the revegetation that we call it, because it's not only trees but also different types of plants and bushes. We are relying also on involving the private sector so they can adopt a space and they can monitoring the maintenance of that space. We are also introducing irrigation artificial systems in some places using reused recycled water for irrigating those part of the city. And in terms of biodiversity, we are building a baseline with the Centro Geo, is a public institution, a geographic institution in Mexico City, where we are building the Urban Biodiversity Index for Mexico City. And we're including also indicators on perception, asking people how they are seeing the change in their surrounding areas in terms of biodiversity, and how are they perceiving that change in terms of benefits for their health and in general for the improvement of the space they are living. And there was another question on floods. Of course, natural-based solutions can help a lot with managing floods, but there's also the other side of the coin in which we are implementing very strong recycling policies, because one of the main challenges for the managing floods is the blockages that are made by waste in the drainage. No? So because there's a lot of waste in some main avenues that cause flood. No? So that is in change, and as my colleague from London said, no, it's a complete environmental policy where waste management and the zero waste management plans intersects with, for example, flood control. No? Not only natural-based solutions are the solution for flood management. And I don't know if I covered pretty much all of it. There was the illegal. There was a question on illegal logging. I think that there's a, I don't know how to say this in English, a veda forestal, a restricted the restriction in Mexican forests that you can not really manage sustainably the forest, and you only, there's the policy of conserving only, and that has decades in Mexico City. And I think the way for tackling illegal logging is to take away that veda forestal, to actually work with communities and to help them manage sustainable their forests, and actually commercialize some forest and non-forest, non-wood forest products to tackle illegal logging in Mexico City's forests.
Thank you. Well, you covered all of those questions in one go. That's a difficult journey, so much appreciated. We are at the hour, so I know that some people might have to drop off, but if the speakers have a chance for a question or two, if that's okay. If not, we totally understand. But if possible, I saw that there was a question directed to Sikhumbuzo in KwaDukuza, about how to really keep up the political momentum, and so that it's not that, you know, the job is done and then you move on to the next issue, but how do you keep the energy and the momentum going strong? If you could add some thoughts on that. And you are on mute. Oh, perfect.
Yes, ma'am. Thanks for the question. I think the key issue for us that have been assisted to keep the momentum going, as I've indicated, that we have ensured that on a monthly basis, we report for the steering item around the board compact of mayors, which was a commitment of the mayor, where the compact of mayors is all departments, they've made commitments. We've made commitment on behalf of, mayor made commitment on behalf of the institution. So each and every business unit will then report on the progress that they are making to make those commitments. The second one is that we did have an advantage that the political champion was also a chairperson of the committee responsible for climate change. So we'll then report on a monthly basis as part of his quarterly communication, either through the media, electronic, and also press release. We were then able to put the message across. But also one of the things that we've been using in around the community awareness, when we celebrate various environmental related days, we will then use those platforms to communicate the message. So we have been able to do that. But secondly, on my side, in terms of administration, both myself and the municipal manager, we also, our performance is measured also based on that. So on quarterly basis, we report on our progress in terms of meeting the targets that are part of our performance contract. So we're able to be kept on the toes that we've got contracts to deliver. So we have to then assist political leadership to meet their side of the bargain. Thanks.
Thank you. And last but not least, we'll head over back to London. Very impressed by your presentation as well. I mean, this was just a great learning experience all around. And I loved the kind of diagram that you showed, how each sector is sort of addressed, but also integrated and connected. Green infrastructure, air quality, noise. I think noise is one of those key issues as well. And also really interested in about the sharing of information online and keeping this transparent and giving that information to the public. Maybe a question connected to the public is, how does London work with public engagement related activities? And certainly something that WWF would love to work with you on probably in the future as well. So thoughts just kind of generally, but also, you know, how can we support that work?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jennifer. Yeah. Well, engaging with the public and sort of getting their views on our policies has always been sort of core to the way that the GLA operates, not just on environment, but I think across the board. Just in terms of some examples, so when we did the launch of London Environment Strategy, we did a large public consultation on this to enable citizens in London to feed in responses and give feedback. And I think we had 25,000 responses in total. So reached a good, and that goes through some of our existing channels. We have web channels, we have, networks, but also we did stakeholder events that presented the strategies. People could give, feedback in meetings and in discussions. So that's one example of how we've been consulting people. Actually, more recently on the Green New Deal that I mentioned over the summer, we ran a public engagement process on that, so Londoners can have a say in their views on what a green recovery should be, and that was done online. We have an online platform called Talk London, which is a way to engage people and pose questions that allows the public to give feedback and discussion on the policies, but also presents policies in a way that's more accessible to people. So it's not just the very techie policy, it's explaining the context, understanding what that is, and that's a really useful tool that we have set up. And Talk London works for not just an environment tool, it's across the board for all our mayoral policies. But what I would say is that we always want to improve how we engage Londoners. I think what we've seen over the last couple of years in London particularly is there's a huge amount of public interest in climate change and a huge amount of passion around it, which is fantastic. So the mayor's been very clear that our transition to zero carbon has to bring the public with us, and so I think we're always open for new ways of doing that, whether it be through something like a behavior change program, but something like a consultation. And so we'd be very welcome to talk to WWF and others about that in the coming years as well, about what else we could do. So thank you.
That's a wonderful way to end it. So we will very much enjoy continuing to work with you as well. And just from my side, on behalf of WWF, what an absolute pleasure it is to hear from such strong city leaders that are really pushing forward. Certainly the challenges are very present. We've all been living through COVID, but we also know about the need to really address social and environmental issues and economic issues simultaneously. So thank you so much for your time that you've put into this event. I know that the questions are probably still coming and the dialogue will still go on. I would like to recognize my colleague, Anthony Pierce, who's been behind putting all of this event together, coordinated this study and everything. And if I could just ask him to add our OPCC email to the chat, if anyone wants to get in touch with us, as well as our Twitter handle, where everything will be shared at the end of this. And likely this event was recorded, so you should all receive it, but just in case you don't, do get in touch with us via email or certainly on different social media platforms. We are also on Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. But and then just maybe on I have another colleague on this call who just finished our wonderful We Love Cities campaign, and we had extraordinary numbers, which was a public engagement campaign run with WWF and the different cities, both in those cities themselves, but also cities learning across. So, any way that we can continue to work with you, whether it's learning from you or supporting you on work on nature-based solutions or keeping that political momentum strong, as we heard, and certainly the measuring what matters and knowing the really importance of data, not just for climate, but how resilient it has made cities for addressing COVID. So I don't want to take any more of your time, but I do want to thank you so much for joining us here from London, from Mexico City, from KwaDukuza, 3 wonderful national winning cities in the One Planet City Challenge, as well as our global winner from Mexico City, and encourage more cities to join us in the future, because as we say at WWF, the challenges are great, but together it is possible to meet the climate crisis. So thank you from my side to all of you.
Gracias, thank you.
Gracias, igualmente. Ciao. Tac, tac.